Thursday on Daily Delivery. I am Michael Rand. Welcome to 2025. Took yesterday off to celebrate the new year with the family, hung out, got one more day off, but now today I am back. I'm imagining you guys are as well, to whatever you have going on in your busy lives. So thank you for joining me here today. Good show coming up. I'm flying solo today, coming off of the holiday, but I've got some content for you, some best of stuff, a list that I put together just a few days ago to get us through the day, to kind of reflect on 2024, but also look ahead to 2025. So we'll talk about Wolves, Vikings, Twins, Wild, Lynx, all those teams, Gophers, Frost, everybody is in that mix, even a couple of their surprises. So we'll get into that here in just a minute. First, though, what did I miss? I got into a college football game on Wednesday, and that does not happen to me very often. Like every once in a while, you're just watching sports, had some time yesterday to just kind of sit, kind of dodging in and out. The kids are kind of running around, doing their thing. But I had my eye on Texas, Arizona State for a while. I was kind of in and out on that. And then about midway through the fourth quarter, I was like, you know what? I'm going to hop on. We have an exercise bike down in our basement. I'm going to hop on the bike, do a little workout, hoping that the game would at least get me through 30 minutes of bike time. And it was like midway through the fourth at that point. It was 24-8 Texas. And I was just like, all right, come on, Arizona State. Just make it a game. Make this interesting for 30 minutes or close to 30 minutes so I can get through this bike ride. And of course, instead, they made it far more interesting than any of us could have bargained for. They get a touchdown on a fourth down halfback pass. Scattaboo. Love Scattaboo. Fourth down, touchdown. Get the 2-point conversion, 24-16. Get the ball right back on a gorgeous interception. One of the nicest, prettiest interceptions you will see. Go down the field again, a long pass again to Scattaboo, and then he runs it in, runs in the 2-point conversion. Next thing you know, you're tied. He's like, taking off every other play. He's got, all sorts of ailments. He'd been throwing up. And then Arizona State has to kick off. Texas, moves down the field. Game-winning field goal attempt goes wide right. They get the ball back. They've got another chance in the last second. Texas hits it off the upright. It's 24-24 going to overtime. They trade scores in the first overtime, but Arizona State scores first. Scattaboo gets, basically suplexed into the end zone by his own offensive lineman. It's just the drama is off the charts. Texas has it 4th and 13. Arizona State is one play, one stop away from improbably winning a game that they had no business even being in, 30 or 40 minutes ago, because it got to be a little bit of a longer bike ride than I bargained for. 30 or 40 minutes ago. But then Texas, they blitz, Texas picks it up, and it's a pretty easy pitch and catch touchdown, tie game. Texas has the ball first, right at the beginning of second overtime. They score right away, get the 2. Arizona State gets picked off. Ball game. So just a crazy dramatic last half of the fourth quarter and overtime sucked me in. I don't get sucked in easily, A, to college sports, and B, to games in which I don't have some sort of professional or rooting interest, where I'm not like a fan of one of the teams or really interested in one of the teams. I did not care a single bit about Texas or Arizona State going into that game. I did not make a plan to watch it, did not build my day around it other than, hey, this is still on. I'm going to hop on the bike, do a little workout while this is going on, stuff like that. So next thing you know, I'm sucked in. I'm writing on social media that I want to adopt all these Arizona State players. They just left it all out on the field. That's the beauty of sports. It was a pure moment of just getting into a game, getting into the drama of a game with no real rooting interest. I was going for Arizona State by the time they were rallying, and by the time I saw kind of their underdog mentality, by the time I saw what their best players like Scattaboo were doing, but going into it, I had no real rooting interest. I was not emotionally invested in the win and the loss. I was bummed for them when they lost, but I moved on pretty quickly, much more so than you might after your favorite team loses a big game, things like that. So just a pure moment of amazing sports to watch on TV. I was grateful for that on Wednesday. Hope you guys got a chance to watch that game too, or had a similar experience, or will have a similar experience soon. Like I said at the jump, flying solo today, which is just fine. I am bringing in Lavelli Neal III on Friday. A little bit of a companion piece to this, but I wrote a few days ago for the start of the new year, end of 2024, a list of the 10 biggest storylines in Minnesota sports, a year in review for 2024. So I want to run through those, and then I also want to give you my wish list for 6 Minnesota pro teams in 2025. So let's do the rundown of 2024, leaving that in the rearview mirror right now. Number 10, the run that Minnesota State Mankato sports went on in 2024. One of the biggest success stories in all of sports, I would really say, last year, especially Minnesota, especially colleges, men's and women's basketball team. They both won NCAA titles, Division II titles in the spring last year. I think it was late March. The men won 88-85, last-second three-pointer to clinch that. This fall, the football team made the national semifinals, pulling upset after upset after upset. Lost in the semifinals, but they were one of the last teams, I think, to get in, and then they've just pulled a whole bunch of dramatic upsets, losing big late, coming back, and winning those games. So that was a huge run, and the women's soccer team made it to the national title game as well. So that's a lot of high-profile programs at one school getting it done. Number 9, the rebound for the Gophers football team. You might not agree with this one necessarily, but I think that this was a pretty important year for PJ Fleck's team. And obviously they got one more game tomorrow in the Duke's Mayo Bowl. Chance to extend their bowl winning streak. PJ Fleck, I think, has won 5 in a row since he's been here, and they had 2 more before that under Tracy Clay. So they've won 7 bowl games in a row. Last year, they, of course, went to a bowl game, even if they're finishing 5-7. They got in with the academic progress, but 5-7, remember last year, they were in it until November. Then they had a disastrous November. They had a chance there if they ran the table, I think, to be Big Ten West champions last year in the last year of the Big Ten West. Instead, they fumble that opportunity, don't get it done. Next thing you know, here they are, 5-7. PJ Fleck looking at off-season opportunities. UCLA tries to hire him away, or at least has interest in him. He says, kind of last minute, no, I'm staying here. So what happens then is they lose their opener. They lose their first home game to North Carolina. They don't look great doing it. It looks like, oh my gosh, here we go again. They get thumped in the second half by Iowa. But from there, really steady things. Yeah, they had the disappointing loss to Rutgers that kind of stalled their momentum, kind of took away a chance to go to a better bowl game, but some really good wins along the way, including that beatdown of Wisconsin at the end of the season. So they finished 7-5 in the regular season. That's not you're not going to hang a banner for that. You're not going to brag to everybody about a 7-5 season, but you are going to forestall kind of that negative momentum that was building last year. I think 7-5 coming from 5-7 lays the groundwork for, hopefully for them, better years ahead. You don't want a whole bunch of 7-5 years in a row. That's not what you want this program to be. But if you've been 5-7, what you can't afford is another 5-7 season. So I think this was an important year, a stabilizing year, not a great season, but a good one and a stabilizing one, giving them a chance to compete going forward. Number 8, Minnesota wins a championship in their first PWHL season. They, of course, didn't have a nickname when they did it. Now they are the Frost. What a weird run they had last spring, right? They were a very good team for most of the regular season. Then they ended the regular season on a bad losing streak, kind of backed into the playoffs when, they had 5 chances to clinch a spot, lost all those games, but got some help at the very end, squeaked into the playoffs, lost their first 2 playoff games, and then came all the way back from the brink to win that series and then win the championship over Boston. And even that championship series, they thought they had scored the game-winning goal at home in Game 4, only to have it overturned, and then Boston scores the winner moments later, sends it to a Game 5 back in Boston, but Minnesota wins that game, I believe 3-0, to claim a championship. Huge moment for them. Not long after that, general manager Natalie Darwitz is fired. It's a bizarre kind of coda to the season. Now they're back at it again this year, trying for an encore, trying not to have so much drama. But, in terms of on the ice success, in terms of what you would want from a first season from that standpoint, you can't ask for anything more than what the Frost did a year ago in making that run. Number 7, there's a ton of great stories in high school sports. Hard to single just one out, but just the blanket statement of the year it was in high school sports. Here at the Star Tribune, we will remember it as a year when the Minnesota Star Tribune expanded our coverage far beyond just, we've always covered the state tournaments. We've always covered greater Minnesota in those moments, but we're really making an effort right now to cover the entire state from a high school sports standpoint, far more so than we used to. I was the high school sports editor at the Star Tribune for 5 years back in the late 2000s, early 2010s, and I can tell you this is a big undertaking. It was enough to try to cover the metro area exhaustively, to also cover greater Minnesota, all those wonderful schools and other communities, big and small, is a daunting task, but we are taking that on. We're also covering still, every big story, Minneapolis South, led by Poet Davis, the excellent basketball player, making it back to state a couple years after a ton of transfers from that school. Chip Scoggins wrote wonderfully about that earlier this year. Kevon Johnson from Armstrong, huge year. Minneota had a huge prep bowl. Minnetonka was dominant in girls Class 4A basketball. Just so many great stories this year from the world of high school sports. More certainly to come with the winter-spring season coming up here. We'll be at state tournament time before we know it. You always kind of catch your breath at the holidays, but next thing you know, it's going to be February, it's going to be March, and it's going to be madness in the prep sports world. Number 6, Karl Anthony Towns traded to the Knicks. Now we're getting into the nitty-gritty. That was a huge moment in 2024 that will have reverberations into 2025, 2026, 2027, etc. On the heels of one of the most successful seasons in franchise history, and I'll talk about that a little bit more later because that's a storyline too. The Wolves pulled off a stunner right before training camp started. If you forget the timing of it, just the timing of it was rather audacious. Right before the start of training camp, they send Karl Anthony Towns to the Knicks for Julius Randle, Dante DiVincenzo, some other pieces, including what should be a draft pick coming up here, I think via Detroit. Hasn't exactly gone according to plan so far. If you were looking for immediate return on investment, Julius Randle has been a slow fit into the Wolves' offensive system. It's been a little bit better lately. They had won 3 in a row before losing to Oklahoma City the other day. Everybody is losing these days to Oklahoma City. Wolves play Boston tonight. Doesn't get any easier. So if you want to measure them against the best of the best, you have your chance. You had it Tuesday against Oklahoma City and now tonight against Boston. But 17-15 isn't exactly what people had hoped for. Dante DiVincenzo, slow start from three-point range, though he's starting to heat up. You don't know when that future draft capital will come to fruition or convey. It's top 13 protected this year from Detroit, top, I think, 11 the year after that, and top 9 the year after that. So you have to hope Detroit at some point is not one of the worst teams in the league. They're actually playing better this year, but just had a devastating injury, it looks like, to Jaden Ivey in one of Wednesday's games. So we'll have to check that out. But right now, does not look good because Towns is balling out for the Knicks. He's having monster game after monster game. We will see where this all goes. But that was certainly a huge, huge shakeup, one that I don't think fans have quite recovered from yet. Number 5, Suni Lee and several other Minnesotans dominate the Summer Olympics. U.S. gymnastics trials were here in Minneapolis in 2024 this summer. Suni Lee qualifies for the U.S. team, coming off of, a rough go of it with injuries, with, her health condition, things like that. Ends up winning 2 individual bronze medals at the Olympic Games in Paris, plus all-around gold team championship with the U.S. squad. Reagan Smith has another huge Olympics with 5 medals, including 2 gold medals. Set a world record in the 100 backstroke during the trials. Like, Minnesotans dominated the summer games this year in a way that we're just not accustomed to. Like, we've seen them win a lot in the past, and we had Anthony Edwards, Nafisa Collier had monster Olympics too on the basketball side, both of them gaining tons of confidence and exposure from that experience as well. So it was a huge Olympics for Minnesota athletes. Number 4, the collapse and sale of the Twins. Now, they're not sold yet, but they are up for sale. Think about this. Mid-August, Twins were 70-53. They were coming off of a year where they won a playoff series for the first time in more than 20 years, a playoff game for the first time, I think, in 19 years. They had that 18-game postseason losing streak that was snapped in 2023. Royce Lewis had been a hero. He was, doing his thing again this year. They had a good mix. The pitching was good. Joe Ryan goes down with an injury. They're trying to withstand that, but they're 70-53 after 123 games, looking like, hey, maybe they can battle Cleveland for the division title, but failing that, lock down one of those wild card spots. Instead, they go 12-27 in their last 39 games. 12-27 to completely fall apart, completely fall off the face of the earth. Detroit and Kansas City from their division both make it to the next round as wild cards. They're sitting at home wondering what happens, but they don't have time to think about it long because pretty soon after that, the Pohlad family announces that the team is up for sale. They've owned the team for 40 years, but now they will be in different hands as long as a new ownership group wants to come in and own this team. Just a complete kind of ripping up of the ground underneath you from where you were in August to where you were in October. It was an amazing, amazing story in 2024. All right, getting down to the last 3. Number 3, a Lynx run to the verge of a title. What a year. Well, we're looking at the Vikings right now. We'll get to them in a minute. We're looking at the Vikings right now at 14-2, a chance to win the division with a win over Detroit on Sunday, a chance to claim home field advantage throughout the playoffs. Just a complete shock, a complete surprise as to how good they've been this season. And the Lynx were just as surprising and more accomplished at this point. They went 30-10 this year after, I think the over-under for wagering was 16.5. Just like the Vikings were like 6.5, 7.5, wherever you looked. Now they're at 14. The Lynx almost doubled up their number 2, and then they went to the playoffs and kept doing it, kept winning the way they win with defense, with good team play, built around Nafisa Collier, built around the strong supporting cast around her. Got all the way to the brink of a championship. Game 5 of the title series. Last possession. New York gets a favorable call, you might say. There was a traveling call that was missed. There was a questionable foul in there. They wind up tying the game, winning it in the closing moments down the stretch, overtime. New York gets its first title. The Lynx might feel like they were robbed, and justifiably so, but that should not take away from how great that season was, and hopefully makes them hungry for 2025, which I'll get to in a little while here. Number 2, Wolves make a run to the Western Conference Finals. Yes, before they traded Karl-Anthony Towns, just 4 or 5 months before that, they made a playoff run all the way to the conference finals. Only the second time ever that they'd even advanced in the playoffs to win a playoff series Both times they had gone all the way to the Western Conference Finals, both times 20 years apart. In this case, they sweep the Suns. We thought we were going to lose to the Suns, right? The Suns were supposed to be a bad matchup, even for the 56-win Timberwolves. Instead, they sweep the Suns, and then they play Denver. They win the first 2 games in Denver, lose the next 3, and then have to go and play Denver again. And then they win Game 6, and then go back to Denver, go down 20. I think it was 58-38, go down 20 points, come storming back and beat the Nuggets to win that series. Then, of course, they lose in 5 to the Mavs. The season ends poorly. A lot of close games in those first 3. Could have gone either way, but they didn't. The Mavs has had better playmakers in those clutch moments. Kyrie, Luka Doncic, those guys are just too good in those moments. But it was a great season for the Wolves and a great moment for the franchise. Number 1, Vikings Magic ride. And obviously this isn't over. This story is incomplete at this point, but because of just everything that happened in 2024, we got to put them number 1, right? Like, you go back to March, it's free agency. They decide to let Kirk Cousins go. He finds a big deal in Atlanta. They swoop in and sign Sam Darnold to a 1-year deal. Not long after that, they draft J.J. McCarthy, their quarterback of the future. So they got there's a short-term quarterback of the present, their long-term quarterback of the future, but nobody has much of an expectation for this season. It's going to be, hey, let's see what they've got, see when they're going to turn this thing over to McCarthy. McCarthy gets hurt in the preseason, then it's even more diminished in terms of expectations. It's just like, what do we even have to look forward to? What do we even have to watch this season? Well, now they're 14-2. Sam Darnold is playing like an MVP candidate. He's going to get MVP votes. He should be in the top 5 of the voting this year. I don't think he's going to win it, but he should be in the top 5. Like someone like Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, maybe even Saquon Barkley are going to get a lot of votes. Joe Burrow is going to get some votes just because of the obscene numbers he's putting up. But Sam Darnold has been playing at least the back half of this season and overall numbers-wise like an MVP candidate, taking them to the brink of home field advantage throughout the playoffs if they can win at Detroit on Sunday. Just an amazing story. What a 2024 it was. Just so many positive stories, so many good things happened to Minnesota teams in 2024. You just got to stop and recognize all that happened last year.
Watch your dreams and savings grow with Royal Credit Union's 4.25% annual percentage yield 12-month certificate. Open now at any Royal office or online at rcu.org/certificate saver. Early withdrawal penalties could reduce earnings and principal. APY accurate as of 2/1/25. Insured by NCUA.
All right, let's finish with an extended cooler. Like I said, Lavelle E. Neal III will be on tomorrow's show. We'll talk about, we'll do some of our daily delivery debate segment. We'll also talk about his recent piece on things to look forward to in 2025 that could be really good for the Twin Cities sports market. But I wanted to offer up a few things of my own right now, a wish list of sorts for 2025, things I want 6 pro teams to have. I'll just write these. I'll just go in order of how I wrote these down. Timberwolves, I want them to have a new point guard. I think that's the one thing that could unlock everything that's going on right now. Mike Conley Jr. just isn't it right now. I know he had that flurry the other night where he made a bunch of threes in a row against Oklahoma City. OKC just like blitzed them right after that. He's a liability a lot of times on the court right now. He's something's happened. He's just kind of lost a half step. And at that age, if you've lost half a step, just ask Kirk Cousins. If you've lost half a step, you are in a tough spot. His offensive game just isn't quite where it used to be. His defensive game in particular, he's not quick enough to guard guys one-on-one, especially on the perimeter anymore. They have to sub him out on defense at the end of games, and then you just don't have the offensive flow that you would like. So if they can find a way to get a short-term point guard in here before Rob Dillingham is ready, but after now Mike Conley Jr. has shown that he's just not the guy, that is what I would wish for the Wolves if they are serious about making this not just a season of transition, if they really want to try to win going forward in 2025. For the Vikings, I want a January of joy for the Vikings and their fans. I know that's maybe a little bit squishy, a little bit wishy-washy. That carries you through the NFC playoffs. The Super Bowl is, I believe, February 9th this year. but that carries you through the playoffs. I want people to enjoy this. I want people to say, you know what, look, whatever happens, but especially if certain things happen, this was fun. This year was unbelievably fun. Try not to approach every game with such tension or fear or some other emotion that's other than, man, what a joy this has been. What a season of joy this has been. Not just like whimsical, not just like, a couple of years ago when they're winning all these weird games when you knew they weren't all that good. This team is good. This team is very good. This team has a chance. And when you watch them play, they are a joyful bunch to watch and to be around. So try to enjoy this as best you can. That'll be my wish for Vikings and their fans. Twins, I want a new owner. They want a new owner too. I would love it if they could find an owner. And again, we've seen some rumblings of who might be interested in him. An owner with deep pockets and someone who's not necessarily going to run this as a year-to-year business where you've got to hit a certain number. There's no other way to compete year in and year out in baseball anymore. I just don't think there is. You can't win a World Series without spending a little bit. You've got to be able to go find those pieces when you have the opportunity. And we thought they were starting to get in that mode when they signed Carlos Correa a couple of years ago. It doesn't feel like that anymore. It feels like they're more in cost-cutting, dollar-conscious mode right now. It's just a hard way to win. You might win a division title every now and then. You might squeak in as a wild card every now and then if your young players have years that exceed your expectations, but you are not going to be a long-term contender thinking that way. So I want them to have new ownership that has a different way of running this team. The Wild, I just want health. I want to see if this team is for real, but we can't know that unless they're healthy, right? They lost Gustafson for a while. We saw what that did to them. He's back. He's been much more, he's been healthy. They've been much more stable with him back in the nets. They've got some big ones coming up this week against Washington, against Carolina. They dispatched Nashville the other day. Nashville, not a good team, but they did win that game, but they're missing Kaprizov. We don't know how long Spurgeon might be out. He took a dirty hit the other day against Nashville, and he's out for, he missed the rest of that game. So I want to see them at or close to full strength, at least with a close to full complement of all their best players, because this team, when they were healthy mostly at the start of the year, was playing like one of the NHL's best teams. Can they get healthy enough down the stretch here to show us exactly who they are? For the Lynx, I want them to be able to run it back. I want them to take whatever positives, and there was tons of them last year, take the positives from last year, use them for fuel, but also take how it finished last year and use that for fuel. Find a way to have this kind of success duplicated, because one of the things I've noticed in Minnesota sports in being here for 30 years, covering these teams for a long time, is that replicating success has been very hard for Minnesota teams, especially after they have a year of unexpected success. You go back to the Vikings, the Timberwolves, the Wild, even sometimes the Twins. Anytime they've had a great year, they've tended to follow it up with disappointment. I don't want to see that for the Lynx. I want them to be able to build on last season, show us something different, show us that this is an and not just a one-off, show us that they are built again for the long haul. Finally, for the Loons, I want a serious run. I want them to have a serious year where everything is stable. We're not talking about, they hired this guy late, that guy late, transition window, things like this, all these windows that are open, transfer window, things like that. I want to see them start to finish, have the kind of opportunity that they can build a roster, build the team they want from start to finish, and see where that gets them. Because I think they planted some pretty impressive seeds last year to be able to get through a round of the playoffs. It didn't end well. They got blitzed. They got blitzed in the end. We saw that they were not quite ready for prime time in terms of the best of the best. But I want to see them get to a point where, again, they can compete for an MLS Cup, where they're not just a nice, cute little story trying to get a fringe playoff spot, but start to finish, start building out the kind of team and organization that I think they are on track to become. That'll do it for me today. Like I said, Lavelle E. Neal III coming up on tomorrow's show. We'll get into some more 2025 stuff. We'll get into some of our daily delivery debate subjects as well. Until then, Happy New Year. say goodbye to 2024, whether it was good or bad or ugly for you. We'll see you again tomorrow.